Because in 2020, all of the viral moments from that one debate between Biden and Trump were from Trump, who kept interrupting Biden time and time again. Biden could barely get a response or answer out here. And then that kind of dovetails into the conversation overall about the feelings of this election. Are we in a substance election? Is it substantive, or is it purely personality? Is it purely vibes, Tom, right at this point in time?
That's one of the big questions I have coming into tonight. Obviously, people tune into these things because they want to find out what a future president of the United States has planned for the country if they were to be elected. But, clearly these debates are not just about that. Everybody wants to be high-minded about these things. But yeah, people tune in because they want to see that knockout blow. They want to see that one-liner. They want to see that thing that everybody's going to be talking about the next morning around the water cooler or the coffee pot or whatever passes for social interaction.
All right, guys, welcome to our first live video here on the channel. So we have Trump awesomeness. We're going to be marking all the times Kamala uses some fake news statistics. Laughs. So if you have any that you think should also go on the board, I can add them now before the debate begins. But I can already tell you we're going to have a lot of word salads and a lot of hyena laughs. So drop a comment in chat if you think there's something else we should mark and keep track of. We're about kind of chill, watch Fox News a bit until the debate actually begins. Thanks for joining.
And also his vast television experience before he ever became a political figure. So, she, yes, has been a United States senator and an attorney general and a prosecutor and has, prosecuted cases in a courtroom. This is a different arena tonight, and it's one that Trump has shown in the past that he has a command of. So the last time Kamala Harris did this was 4 years ago against Mike Pence.
Right.
I think no matter what you want to say about either man, Mike Pence and Donald Trump are two very different individuals, and we expect him to, debate very differently.
Yeah, of course, we know Pence is not even voting for Trump. How their relationship has changed in the last 4 years. Tom,
come on, Pence.
Too, because Harris ran for president once before. I covered her primary campaign back in late 2019.
Oh, I like that.
She took positions then that she has moved away from now. Some then were quite progressive, far left. Many have described them on a whole host of issues here.
So we're adding to the board here how many times Kamala says racist. I'm going to add one, how many sob stories she shares about her little nieces and her being a little girl in America. So if you guys are just joining, we're keeping track of how many times Trump is awesome, how many times Kamala uses fake news, word salads, hyena laughs, how many times she says racist, and all of her sob stories.
Look, there is a science to debating.
Favorite YouTuber. Wow, that is high praise. Thank you.
Nights like this, there's a couple of different.
Am I racist coming out? Yeah. Gonna check that out for sure.
Another was correction, maybe kind of putting in context something they said. Another one is calling out contradictions. This is, part and parcel how politics work.
Yeah, if she says, "Excuse me, I'm talking," we got definitely. Wait. I don't know if that's going to be an issue because they're doing the thing where they mute the microphone. So I don't think she's going to say it because they literally can't interrupt each other because the microphones will be muted. Good suggestion, though.
They say, well, look, you're pointing out something of Kamala Harris when she was running for president in one of the earliest Democratic primary debates, and I'm thinking about the border situation, decriminalization, and stuff like that.
This is not an ASMR channel.
Candidates tend to run to the margins of their party in the primary session and then move to the center if they are then become the nominee. Harris never got that far. Remember, she dropped out of that primary race early on. So in her positioning herself as a progressive in that race, and remember, there were other progressives in that.
I like muted mics because people will be able to finish their points, but it's funny to see them try to talk over each other, and I guarantee you Trump would dominate Kamala in just being able to talk over her and get his points in. So what was that last one? Was it Biden and Trump where they're just talking over each other the whole time? No one could get a word in edgewise. It was so frustrating. And the moderators are always super biased anyway. So I think it's good. I think it's good that they have muted mics. Let people get their points out. It's not such a circus.
Some Democrats have been some Republicans have been quite alarmed by what they see as some motion in Trump's position on abortion.
Yeah. What about Trump's attacks on Harris? He calls her Comrade Kamala. He has various nicknames also for Coach Walls as well. We can get into some of that here because the Trump campaign had to make also their own switcheroo in their focus of their strategy against a new candidate. How are they doing in that strategy? Has it been effective or have they struggled with it since she became the nominee?
Listen, I tell people all the time, I've interviewed the former president probably about...
Vaughn, you didn't get your concealed carry permit, huh? Paraphernalia charge. Ah, bummer. In Utah, you can open carry or concealed carry. You don't need the class or the permit, but it does have to be a two-step, so you need to not have a bullet chambered. So you have to rack the slide and then fire, so it can't be ready to go. But that's pretty recent, and within the last 2 or 3 years, just concealed carry without that permit.
When he gets into these forums and these debates,
you guys are killing me. I hate to brag, but I've won as many presidential primaries as Kamala. That makes 2 of us. First time watching a debate. Yeah, they've been pretty boring in past years, just 2 white guys talking about nothing. It wasn't until Trump came into the picture that these became actually fun, prime time, something to actually watch as entertainment, right? Philadelphia. Can't have loaded in a vehicle. Yeah. I had a childhood friend. He would clean out people's garages and vacuum out their cars, kitchen wall, and killed one of his friends. Pretty unfortunate. But yeah, I can see why not in cars. I love concealed carry on person. I think all teachers should carry on person, but don't leave it in your purse. Don't leave it where someone can grab it. Should we kick Texas here?
It could be described that it's somewhat of a loss for the American voter that this is probably the only time we'll see them in a head-to-head.
Bye-bye.
No more debates between them scheduled. Usually in cycles we get at least 3 between the candidates. This is seemingly it here.
To answer your question, I've moderated debates. I like having a crowd in the room. I think it gives a life to the room. If they want to cheer or clap, yes, the moderator's job and my job has been in the past when I've had to moderate debates to kind of calm that down to allow the debate to proceed. But as long as it's within reason, I think that...
Vaughn, try to get a silencer or suppressor. That background check is crazy.
It gives people a feel of how the things that these...
Yeah, is Tampon Tim going to be sitting in Kamala's lap like the last interview they did with CNN?
I'm going to date myself. All right, we got it. When Lloyd Benson looked at Dan Quayle and You're no Jack Kennedy. Never forget.
Okay.
I think you learn something when you don't have people in the room.
All right. We'll look for those moments. Tom Fitzgerald, as always, can't thank you enough, and happy debate night. We'll see you.
All right.
All right, in the meantime, before we take our final commercial break of the hour, I just want to let you know that at least 10,000 of you have weighed in on this very question about which policy should the next president prioritize: the economy taking the cake, later followed by immigration, and then crime. So scan that QR code. We'll keep this question, this poll alive here. Speaking of polls, though, Tom and I were talking about how close it is between Harris and Trump. This is the Harvard-Harris poll out in the last few days. It's tied there.
50-50.
This is a national head-to-head matchup as well.
Dang.
We don't only have just the Harvard-Harris poll.
Let's put it over Harris.
Polls like the Times Siena poll that just came out over the weekend. Harris down by 1 over Trump. And then, of course, the RCP poll average. This is an average of polls. There has Harris up over Trump just by 1 here. So
did he just say
take our
holes
final
and
commercial
polls?
break of the hour. Remember, we are moments away from the first presidential debate between Harris and Trump. Here it will be simulcast online.
You know, if Kamala won, I wouldn't go to Canada or do that stupid stuff like Whoopi Goldberg said she'd do. I'd probably cry for a minute and then get on with my life, right? Only 4 years, so we can get a Republican back in, but there's no way she's going to win. It's like the record smallest amount of time in an election campaign for a presidential campaign, right? What is it, like a month, 2 months? Trump's new book, $400 for an autographed one. Okay, how much is it without the autograph? I can just add that, right? That's the number one, like, most faked thing in memorabilia are autographs. Hard to authenticate. No, Whoopi Goldberg said she'd move to Canada if Trump took the presidency, and he did, and she stuck around. That's what I meant. $99. Cool. Support his campaign, right? I'll do that. Yeah, very true. The locusts have to come. The world needs to basically be on the brink, right, before the second coming, because the economy, you could see in the polls that Fox ran, economy and immigration, those are the top two topics there, and then crime. So top three, we've got the economy, we've got immigration, and we have crime, and a lot of crime is due to illegal immigration, right? We got migrants who are breaking into stores. They are bringing the worst of the other countries in, right? We're not getting the best of the other countries. We're not getting their engineers and scientists. We're getting the people who are escaping the country and just trying to suck off America's teat, as it were. Yeah, everybody says they'll move out of America if Trump wins. All the left says that, but they don't, because it's the greatest place on earth, right? This is the best country to live in. So it's all lip service.
Moments away from the ABC News presidential debate. Let's check in with some of our reporters.
Hey, no one, you forget that Kamala was middle class. That's all she likes to say. She worked at McDonald's, right? No one could prove it. No one's been able to prove that she actually worked at McDonald's. So I call BS.
We're inside the spin room just minutes away. As you mentioned, we're seeing politicians, surrogates, media everywhere coming through to do interviews.
Looks like
and
Wall
this
Street.
could not be a more high-stakes evening, this debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And it's
About 5
actually
minutes
the
out
first
if they
night
start on time.
these two candidates will even meet in person. Security is tight in Philadelphia.
I wonder
Fencing
why.
and concrete barriers surround the National Constitution Center, and there's a heavy police presence as former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris gear up for the most critical night of this election.
The
What you're going to see is the strength and the confidence of Vice President Harris.
Oh, you guys are awesome.
And people will see that we can't have 4 years of Kamala Harris.
Harris entered the race just 7 weeks ago after President Biden dropped out, giving her limited time to
Yeah, they announced
define her
the
candidacy.
moderators.
Her
I
campaign
forget their
says
names.
tonight, the vice president is focusing
Talk
on
to
policy.
Harris.
She's
Correct,
gonna
correct.
talk about her plans to lower people's costs, her plans to take on grocery prices, her plans to build more housing in this country.
Trump won a coin toss and chose to give the final closing statement.
Nice.
The former
And
president's
strong.
team says he will portray a Harris administration as a continuation of Biden's presidency.
The most important thing that President Trump wants to get
Exactly.
across is that we have extremely different policy ideas for the future of America.
There is mounting pressure on both candidates to perform with national.
If you guys are just joining, we're going to be marking some things, keeping track. Times Trump is awesome. Times Kamala talks about fake news, has word salads, hyena laughs, says the word racist, or shares a sob story. If you have any other suggestions, leave it in chat, but we'll pretty much lock those in. Yeah, we got to see Vance versus Walz. JD Vance would destroy him. We've got an actual Marine who's seen combat duty, and then you got Walz, who spent 24 years in the National Guard, never saw combat, said he did, but said he was mistaken about it. No. There's a big difference between a combat vet and a guy who played combat at home.
All that has transpired over the course of the last 3 months here, not only in the Biden administration, but also in the Trump campaign as well. You know it by now. It's been a hugely consequential and historic summer, not only with the assassination attempt against Donald Trump's life, not only with President Biden withdrawing from the top of the ticket, events that happened in the course of 10 days.
Hey guys, I also have a soundboard here.
Fake news. America great again.
Sprinkle that in.
We'll be bringing on reporters and analysts and experts to talk about what we all just heard and what we all just saw here. We'll also be showing you some of the highlights, the reels.
Man, you guys, I did a ton of videos on the Trump assassination attempt. It went from 300,000 views, 100,000 views to like 3,000 views within a matter of days. Like that terrible breakdancer, Reagan or whatever her name was, had a bigger news cycle than the Trump assassination attempt. And an American died, right? Corey Comparator died, and they moved on. They're like, oh yeah, who cares? Let's bury it under the rug. Let's brush it under the bed.
As ABC News moderators David Muir and Lindsay Davis, we'll kick it off. We've gone over some of the rules for the debate, and let's go out to Philadelphia. There at the National Constitution.
Yeah, Biden was on the beach when Trump was talking to the Gold Star family members. Kamala was 10 minutes up the road, right, at her house. She couldn't be bothered to go either. Because when he pulled out of Iraq, Afghanistan, that's when it all happened. That's how it went all down.
Former President Donald Trump, their first face-to-face meeting in his presidential election, their first face-to-face meeting ever.
A historic race for president upended just weeks ago. President Biden withdrawing after his last debate. Donald Trump now up against a new opponent.
The candidate separated by the small
If he's not fit to run for re-election, what is he still doing in office?
play. The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special. The most consequential moment of this campaign.
All right, we can add to the board how many plain insults and how many times Biden is brought up. Okay, I like that. I like that. Biden and insults.
Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world.
All right, here we go.
Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the
need
most
to get on Rumble.
consequential event of their campaigns, with Election
YouTube
Day now less than 2 months away.
Delete my
For
videos,
Vice
but they
President Kamala
demonetize
Harris,
a
this
lot
is her
of them.
first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
Tell me
And
if
that
I'm
brings
talking
us
too
to the
much.
rules of tonight's debate. 90 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
What fall on your face? Are they going to shake hands?
Kamala Harris.
No,
Good debate.
no shit.
Thank you.
Kamala Harris?
To you both.
Is that your name?
It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that
look
voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people.
Bidenomics.
We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. I was actually, my mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
What's your policy,
Kamala?
Kamala?
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When
China did it to us first.
I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation has, which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before.
9%.
Probably the worst in our nation's history.
Yeah.
We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden let into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again, and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
The pandemic did.
Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025
which he's disassociated himself with. He just is like, yeah,
if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it.
This was
a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas. I guess some good, some bad. But it makes no difference. I have nothing to do.
They've been doing this since the Reagan administration.
Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the
inflation
pandemic
was like
came
2%.
in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Kamala Harris takes credit for all the jobs created after the pandemic, because it's just people going back to work.
Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy.
So haven't you done it yet?
What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan. And it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, Will Trump doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country.
China's been bumping it up on us. Why can't we do it to them?
Many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have, and who's going to have higher prices, is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at
Eagle,
the poll.
you got live chat banned.
80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. "Thank you, President Xi," exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window.
Yep,
She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat.
Fracking.
She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics.
Prices.
And he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in America. Great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, "I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks." But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
How is she neutral?
The reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month.
Leave it up to the
They
state.
even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job, but the governor before, He said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also, 85%. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up into it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
Yeah. There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President,
of course, the woman of color
well, as I
has
said,
the last line on that.
And that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life.
It's not health care,
Trump
it's
abortion
baby
bans
murder.
that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot.
She said that before.
She didn't want that.
That's the same tired old story.
A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term? They don't want that.
Trump just said,
and I pledge
in the
to
exception of incest,
when Congress passes a bill
or
to
danger
put
to
back
the mother
in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand,
such a politician.
If Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban, because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this
States
issue
control.
has now been taken over by the states.
Right.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50.
Yeah, Supreme Court.
Essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House.
Yeah.
She's not going to get the vote. She gives me up when they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss.
$50K off my account.
If you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look.
Hey, Josh, man.
We don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans.
They dangled the carrot, but they never gave it to us.
So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress.
Empty promises.
Wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
Oh, man, the bias in this lady.
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade, and as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America.
But in
and understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford child care as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers, to go and get the health care she needs.
Oh, no!
Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through
just get on a plane.
Is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that?
Come on, man.
Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
veto? Because under Roe v. Wade,
answer the question, would you veto?
You could do abortions in the 7th
Justin
month,
Trudeau
the 8th
as a
month,
female.
the 9th month, and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country.
To recreate the Trump
Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations.
How about we vet the criminals bringing the...
Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch.
Yeah,
you will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early.
And a man can be a woman, and a woman can be a man.
And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
I'm talking to the people. I pledge to you. I'm the president.
On that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go.
Because he got Megan Thee Stallion twerking on stage.
She's bussing them in and paying them to be there.
Yeah.
And then
they
showing them in a different light.
Yeah,
so
they proved that they fake the audiences.
People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase.
Hell yeah.
Make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking
television
it from the city
saying
manager.
Their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme.
Take a minute. Oh, finally laugh.
You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans, Mitt Romney and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term.
How much are you paying them
and when
to say
we
that?
listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military. You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof, despite their fraudulent
he didn't really answer the question there, to be honest.
Crime in this country is through the roof, and we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime, and it's happening at levels that nobody thought
New York City, they're raiding warehouses.
As you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
excuse me, the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said
only
they created turned out to be a fraud.
of agencies participate in that survey, and only 60% of crimes are actually reported.
Coming from someone who has been prosecuted.
Oh, he's a felon. Should have wrote that down.
National security crimes, economic crimes, election interference.
Insults.
Has been found liable for
Personal
sexual
insults.
assault.
Here we go.
And his next
Two of those.
big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear,
personal attacks,
where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law.
At least he didn't sleep his way up the ranks,
The former
Kamala.
vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important
justice
that we
system.
move forward, that we turn
the judge and district attorney campaigned
on
getting Trump.
Rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted.
Fix your problems you made.
The same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. No. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice President
to stop
Harris.
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about
their rhetoric.
They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy.
Dictator.
They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed.
Addressing the flip-flop.
So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the,
they haven't changed. She's never behind them in the first place.
Let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020.
Yeah, literally in Pennsylvania.
I will not ban fracking. I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking.
No, in 2019 she said that. 2020 she said she would not.
We have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil.
So why'd you shut down the pipeline?
As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother.
Sob story.
Who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed
she lived in Canada as a teenager.
$400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders.
She didn't mention McDonald's.
3 million homes, increased by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens.
$1 million.
And a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever.
100%.
She gave all that stuff up. Very wrongly,
She's
very
smoking
horribly.
weed back then.
And everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like,
you want my guns back, come and get them.
Defund the police.
Try
in
to.
Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute, I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please.
Oh, did a Kamala to him.
She went out. She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on a liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar.
But one here in Utah. Acres and acres
400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get to.
environment,
We're
as she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days.
Not to mention the lithium
and I
mining.
want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world
did
saw
not
what played out
incite
in the
it.
Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television.
He left
off the Oval
office. He didn't stay in office.
You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
That's a
You
shitty
just
question.
said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech,
He left that
not
out
later on.
Yep.
Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
The person that got killed on January 6th was a Trump supporter.
It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs.
Right.
I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob.
Fake news.
To attack our nation's capital.
That's libel.
To desecrate.
She just said he incited
capital.
violence. That's libel.
140 law enforcement. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason.
It's all fake news.
But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate.
Oh, no!
And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that
freedom of speech,
when
baby.
it came to the Proud Boys, a militia,
mention Antifa, please.
The former president said, stand back and stand by.
They burned down Minnesota.
So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place.
How do you turn the page? You're already in office, bitch.
For you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the democracy. At that point,
let's be clear.
Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not
That's
go
on
back.
inciting violence.
Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards
Go
to the
and
past.
read that speech he gave.
Follow up here.
It was
She
a
just is
different term,
completely
and it was a term
making this up.
that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many
right
people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won. Leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls.
You're right.
We need, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have standing.
Fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that.
Fired, no.
Clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters. I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost, because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person. Smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? You need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. Yep. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended
domestic oil.
But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Yeah. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president.
Respected.
But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy.
Yep.
He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes.
Kamala called him racist.
She was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held Americans. Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel
Taliban leader a picture of his own home and said we're going to pull out Americans and you're not going to hurt any of them.
Palestinians
I'm going to kill you.
Dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization,
oh, insults, yeah,
slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians
would never have happened if
security,
Trump was still in office.
Self-determination, and the dignity they
Ukraine
so rightly
war.
deserve.
President Trump,
Palestine.
how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
Ooh,
if I were president, it would have never started.
Yeah.
If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all, or Hezbollah, or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
Entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that.
Sure.
He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin,
he said, I'll be a dictator day one.
He can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un, and it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it. That's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Okay, guys, let's look at the board so far. For Trump awesomeness, we've got 6 fake news. We've got 3 personal insults, 1 word salad, 1 hyena laugh. She's actually not laughing as much, probably because there's no audience, so it'd sound just terrible, which it already does. No mention of the other candidate being racist, and 7 sob stories, all from good old Kamala Harris, because she cares about our feelings. Anyway, what do you guys think of the debate so far? Who's winning? Who's edging out? I feel like Trump needs to just answer the questions like asked, what are you going to do when you get in office to stop the wars? They never would have happened with me, but here's what I'm going to do. He goes a little bit off topic, so that would be the only kind of bad mark against him. Kamala Harris, obviously... She's just repeating all these talking points, all these things that they've been repeating for the past few months. Nothing really new there, and no real great rebuttals. It's just kind of the same crap she's been spewing for, I don't know, years now. Hey, Stowen. Trump 2024, let's go. Do you guys like this soundboard? I got to find some more sounds here.
We need to build a wall.
They haven't mentioned that Kamala will continue building the wall that Trump started, use the remaining funds that Trump garnered to finish the wall. A lot of talk about China. A lot of blaming about the coronavirus and pandemic, saying that Trump's presidency was affected, and after that, Biden and Harris was able to just come in and save the world, when really it was just a global epidemic, right? How's the audio? Everything sounding good? We good? Am I talking too much during the actual debate? I don't know. Is this set to be for 2 hours? I know they each get like a 2-minute block to speak, and then there's a 1-minute rebuttal time. I'm not sure how far or how long this is going to go. We're watching this on Fox News. It's being filmed through ABC. Say what you will about them. I don't really think they're a neutral party, but right now, Fox has 566,000 viewers. They are filming in Philadelphia. Or sorry, Pennsylvania. I've been watching the whole time, or if not, the cool thing about this is you can actually just click back on the little red bar and go back to the start. I'll probably post this as a YouTube video later and edit out the intro and kind of just waiting for the debate to start. But Kamala is a little better spoken than I thought she would be. I will give her that. She is, I guess after Biden, anything slightly chocolate chip ice cream. Yeah, so I mean, she's doing fair, and I guarantee you liberal news media are going to sing her praises. Oh, she just destroyed Trump, blah blah blah. No, she did not destroy Trump. And there's been some hilarious things from Trump, saying go sign the border bill, Wake up, Biden. You know, he'll get up from his nap at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Oh, this dude's a comedian. He's a showman. It's fun to watch. It is so annoying to watch Kamala Harris keep talking to the camera. I will be your next president. I am for you. I am for the people. And that's what Biden kept doing. I remember the last presidential debate with Biden. Trump called out Biden for doing that. Kept looking at the camera and talking to the person through the lens. And Trump was like, hey, you're such a politician. All right, we're back. Dun, 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 dun. I'm getting old. I'm getting more excited about this than like a boxing match. Chocolate chip. Hey, Casey. Hey, Bama Hama. Ooh, get to the point. Come on. Okay. Yeah. It doesn't matter who wins as long as the killing stops.
Much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize.
Yep.
With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president.
Keyword.
Okay, they respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin. Hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you
think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done?
All right.
Doesn't matter who
Negotiate a
wins.
deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania.
And gave
and
them
through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
For the Taliban to take over.
And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO. Of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. Yep. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. Yep. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something.
Even liberal news media admitted that.
She is a horrible negotiator.
Now they love her.
They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times.
Didn't ask about Zelensky.
The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader, upholding international rules and norms.
Yes or no?
As a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy.
Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer.
And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is Commander-in-Chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on.
Time to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head. Almost all of NATO.
Yeah. Why are we babysitting NATO?
We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade, the statements you made before. If you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate. And we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah. Just be the yes woman.
Said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war
Yeah, but
And
how many
as of
people
today,
died because of it?
there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how
but
we
we
got
left like hundreds of
to
millions
where
of
we
dollars
are.
of military
Donald Trump, when he
equipment
was president,
behind.
negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down.
Deflect.
He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 terrorists, Taliban terrorists, released. And get
Should have
this.
put deflecting or avoiding questions on the board.
And the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive
At least he's talking
respected world leaders.
to these leaders.
And this former president,
He's got the
as
cojones.
president, invited them to Camp David.
How dare
because
he?
he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work
Yet
that we
he
must
went to
do
the
to
Gold
uphold
Members
the
graveside
strength
service, not
and
you.
the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Disgusting.
President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So, if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they
turned us into warlords.
The agreement
Tony
said
Stark.
you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
Ukraine is basically a country that got attacked by a bigger country called Russia.
In this country.
And
Mr. President,
that's
you
bad.
recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago
Oh, yeah,
when she
here we
happened to
go.
turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
Because she uses it as leverage.
I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
I
asking.
don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her.
I'm Irish, I'm
Vice President
Swedish.
Harris, your thoughts on this?
Maybe I say one of one side
think
or one of the
it's-
other, but
I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly
Yet
trying to
she's
divide
pushing
us, and
identity
especially
politics.
by race. And let's remember,
vote for me because I'm a black
how Donald
woman.
Trump started. He was
You're also half Indian, Kamala.
He owned land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families.
Your descendants from people who traded slaves, Kamala, Jamaica.
Who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread... And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other, we don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans.
Most small business owners are Republican.
And let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction. To pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas.
We ruined your economy. Here's a child tax credit. Here's a small business credit.
For young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's
development. Where does that money come from,
I have
Kamala?
a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David,
your small business,
that people
your children.
really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling.
But you can't afford gas and groceries.
Let's turn the page.
He hasn't name called at all.
Thank you. Let's turn to policy. Let's turn back to policy.
He's trying to 8 Mile.
President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she has
we do
a
have to
plan
move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay,
that's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need to respond because the former
Trump,
president has said something twice that I need to respond to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on.
It's breaking down, guys. It's going off the rails.
Trump, this is now your 3rd time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Correct. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So
there's
tonight,
people on it. You can't
9
just
years
kick them
after
out
you first started
like it did to
running,
other
do you
people.
have a plan, and can you tell us what
not all
it is?
providers would offer
Obamacare
it.
was lousy health care.
Yeah.
Always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, We're going to do it, and we're going to replace it. But remember this. I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare.
Talk about vanity
project. But the Democrats
project.
came up, they
Obama
wouldn't
put his
vote
name
for
on
it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now.
Ask Kamala her plan. She has nothing.
We come up with something. I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant
future. Notice they're not pressing
Vice
Kamala
President Harris,
when she
in
deflects and
2017, you
doesn't answer
supported
questions.
Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company
Before
could
Obamacare,
deny
it was bliss.
If a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes.
Do you remember when you lost your doctor because
as I've been vice president, and we
Obamacare?
over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act.
You know how Obama said you could keep your provider, your healthcare provider?
It's going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication. We will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
She should be
Move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years, but it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve
the left calls it
private
Affordable
insurance
Care
for people, private medical insurance.
Right calls it Obamacare.
That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance. That have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax.
Yep.
And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories
EVs,
around the world. Donald Trump
vehicles,
said he was going to create manufacturing jobs.
coal
He lost manufacturing jobs.
and
I'm
natural
also
gas.
proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. They're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to... What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential.
This time I'll be sure to turn up the audio again when we come back. Okay, so I remember Trump was talking about Putin having nuclear capabilities. I remember he gave a tour of the Oval Office one time, and he had a big red button on the table, and he said people are always scared of that button, but if you hit it, all it does is someone comes in, oh, Trump's a troll, and we love it. Yeah, gas prices. So I'm in Utah. I don't know what it's like, you know, especially East Coast, probably West Coast. Idea, just truck over gasoline, get a little tanker and bust it around and resell it. Simple corner store selling gas. I'm surprised Trump hasn't talked about Bidenomics. He had so many great opportunities to. When Kamala was talking about the price of groceries and gas and affordable housing, all that kind of stuff, you know, whose fault is that? That's the person that's been in office for almost the past 4 years, right? Harris, Biden. So talking about it, and then it would cut to her saying that's Bidenomics. So surprised he hasn't brought that up, that she's been a lame duck in office for the entire presidency, and if she wanted to make the changes, she could have, right? Yeah, if you drive a truck with the current gas prices, you are SOL. NGAA, make groceries adorable again. Make groceries affordable again. All right, we're coming back. I'm turning up the audio, guys. I'm turning up the audio. Again, Kamala, a lot more coherent than we expected her to be, but still repeating a lot of the same stuff, a lot of the same spew she's done before. Nothing really new there. Both are kind of deflecting questions. I do feel like Trump is getting pressed more by the moderators to give a straight answer, where they just let Kamala go off on a tangent and they never ever bring it back. So I feel like that's unfair in the moderation. Good debate. I mean, comparing this to the Trump and Biden, that was a train wreck compared to this. At least there's points being made here, and we're actually hearing from both sides. So much better than the Trump Biden debate. But, you know, old man with the afternoon, like Trump mentioned. So it's bound to be a little bit better. Catholic, yeah, she does say a lot, yet almost nothing. Yup. She just talks and talks and talks. I think she tries to find what she's saying as she talks. I don't think her mind works fast enough to be able to just coherently get into it. So she just goes, flaba, 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 flaba. What was I doing again? She has like that interior thought, like, what the hell is that question? Oh, I'm burdened by what has been. We need to look at less hate and disparagement of our races. Oh, now I remember the question. Yeah. You know what it is? I think a good, like Elon Musk, if he's on a podcast or some format like that, he will just pause and then he'll respond. He'll really think through his answer. He doesn't just talk to talk. And I know it's a limited format, right? They each get 2 minutes to speak and they get the rebuttals. So they have to really fill their time, but maybe this isn't the best forum. Wouldn't it be amazing to see them on a long form format like the Joe Rogan podcast, right? Where they can just sit down for a few hours and just talk, not through these memorized lines. Maybe they know the questions that are going to be asked, all these talking points, but just have a real conversation for a few hours in that format. I think that'd be much more beneficial than just, you know, yapping at each other for 2 minutes, then being cut off, yapping for 2 minutes, then being cut off, and having biased moderators.
Live, yeah.
Audio good?
Here again.
Audio good?
David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to act. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us, and we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understand the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people.
Willie Brown.
And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now.
Story.
Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it?
Yeah.
She's been there for 3.5 years.
100%.
They've had 3.5 years to fix the border.
Trump awesome.
They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Normal energy plants. We're not ready for it.
Doesn't work.
We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
Now flip her off. Okay, so final thoughts on this. I mentioned that Trump hadn't hit on her failing for the past 3.5 years. That's because he was saving it for his closing remarks. And that's really the hammer punch, right? If you've seen the post I shared, Kamala Harris is in a lifeguard outfit, and she's saying, when I'm lifeguard, I will save everyone. And in the background, you see a bunch of people floating face down in the pool that she could have saved already. So that's the analogy you have to look at right now. She's a lifeguard of America. How come everybody is drowning in debt? How come no one can afford groceries, gas, and anything else? Oh, look at this. Okay.
Debate, or was there no clear
Which candidate won the debate? 92% said Harris, just said Trump. 92%. This is Fox News, so we'll have to wait to see those real things.
It looks like Trump overwhelmingly, according to you, who have chimed in on this question, believe that Trump won.
All right, guys, let's look at the final board before we stop the screen. Trump awesomeness, we had 8 counts. Get this a little closer. Fake news, we had 9. Mentions of Biden, we had 4. Hyena laugh, surprisingly only 2. Word salads, 3. Talks about race, 2. Sob stories, 8, because man, those lefties love their feelings. Anyway, guys, leave a comment, leave in chat if we should do another live stream. This was pretty fun, first time I've ever done it, so hopefully I didn't screw it up too bad, but yeah, we'll see what we can live stream again. If you got an idea for it, leave a comment. Be sure to like and video. I'm CV, and I'll see you later.